Okay, this is where I stopped just now, right? Okay, so like I mentioned just now, when we talk about HO theory, right? So this is the difference lah. So these are the basic difference between the comparative advantage, absolute advantage, and your HO theory. Okay, so that is why we call it as triple comparison. Okay, so this is the basic difference lah. Okay, so if I ask you the main difference between your HO theory and the other concepts, so this is how you will divide it. Okay, so when we talk about HO theory, the other tools are very common, right? Across two countries, you already know how to read it. Across two products, you already know how to read it, right? I mean, the information given to you, right? But HO theory, that is between two countries, two products, and two factors of productions, right? Or two factor of resources, okay? So what we have over here is, like I mentioned, we are looking into the labor and land, okay? So the labor and land, you can relate it between your both this labor and land. Their mobility is very high, right? So they can freely move between the industries in a country. Okay. For example, in a country, we have two products. Okay. For example, wheat production, right? And cloth production. Okay. So in between this, they are using both the land and labor also, right? So if I don't want to work in in a cloth industry, I can just move to another industry. Okay. For example, now I'm in academic, right? So if I don't want to be a lecturer, I can just go into a finance, banking line, right? So I can choose which industry I want to go. So I can freely move. I want to go to university, or am I going to a financial institution? So I'm freely to move. So laborers are freely to move across the industries. Okay. So this is what they mention over here. Factors of production can freely move between industries in a country. Okay. And the owners of the land are paid with a rent, and the reward to the workers is called as wage rate. This is the factor of payment. Okay. So obviously we have factor of production side. Factors of productions, right? You have LLCE, right? For each one of this, you have factors of payment also, right? Factor of payment. Okay. So for example, for the land, the first one is a land. Okay. So for example, you have a land, you have a building. Okay. I want to start up my business, right? So I come and tell you, can you borrow me your land? I want to start up my business, right? So yes, you can say, yeah, you can take it from me, but in return, you're not giving it for free, right? I have to pay you a rental, right? Or we call it as rent, right? So that is the factor of payment. Okay. The second one is the labor, right? So I'm a labor for an institution, right? So what am I getting as a reward? Will be my wages, right? I'm working somewhere, so they are paying me, right? So that will be my factors of payment. For the services that I'm giving, I'm getting back wages, right? So for the land that for example, I have a building, means you want to borrow my building, I can give it to you, but you pay me in my rental, right? Same goes to the capital and entrepreneurship law. You'll be getting in terms of dividend and profits. Okay, but then we will just look into this more information when we are reading on this. Okay. Okay. So in the short run, with factors of production tied their gains and losses are divided by the output sector. Okay. And all the factors tied with the rising sector will gain, and all the factors tied to declining sector will be losing. So for example, right, in your, right, you have product A and product B, right? So if I'm producing over here, right, which one will be my losing sector? Which one will be gaining sector? Which one will be losing sector? So that means yes for A. B to B. Okay, so that is what mentioned over here. All factors tied to a rising sector will be will be lesser, right? Losing. Okay, so in the short run, this is the effect. Okay, sector are expected to lose. That means they are more focusing on the wheat production, right? So what they will do is they will import cloth. Can you guys understand based on the concept? Okay, based on the sentence, they say that owners of land and laborers in the wheat production are expected to gain. Okay, whereas the owners of land and labor in the cloth production are expected to lose. That means if they have lower production, I will just import cloth over here. Okay. Okay, but then in the long run, the effect will be different. Okay, so the long run effect, it's better to be explained over here, this table. Okay, trust me, this table is very, very important, right? You understand this table, you can answer all the questions ready related to this, right? This is very, very important. They already tell you, this is the initial one. What happens if this happens, right? So I will try to explain now for US, right? I will try to explain to US. The opposite one will be the reaction for the rest of the world. Okay. So for example, US, okay, the initial price for the wheat is cheap, okay, and for the cloth is expensive. Okay. So what happens over here is they open the trading, right? So wheat, they try to export it to rest of the world, whereas the rest of the world try to export their cloth into US over here. Okay. So what happens over here is the prices will respond to the trade, right? If I'm going to export it to another country, obviously I want to see money, right? So what I will do is I increase the price, right? So this is what happened next. Price responded to the trade, right? So what happened over here is the price of the wheat goes higher, okay? Whereas the price of the cloth goes lower. Okay, this is the first reaction. Okay, then production will be affected due to the price, right? So production, how they respond to the prices will be, now you have to think as a producer, right? If the price goes higher, as a producer, you will produce more or less. I repeat back again, you are a producer now, right? The price is higher. You will produce more or less now as a producer, or less, more, right? Why? As a producer, you want to gain more, right? Right? Law of supply. Remember, we see, right? So how they respond to production is, so just now, right? The price of the wheat goes higher, right? So what they will do is produce more wheat, right? Because the price of the wheat is, the cloth is lower, they will produce less cloth. So this is how the reaction will be. Okay, remember, law of supply. Then, for each unit of cloth being sacrificed, many workers and small amount of land is being laid off, right? Okay, wheat, right? You guys know what is wheat, right? The rice comes from the wheat, right? So for you to grow the wheat, you need more land, or to produce a cloth, you need more land. Obviously wheat, right? You need more land, right? For a cloth, you just need a building. That's it, right? So over here, when you are producing less cloth, you are releasing more land over here. But then what needed by a wheat is totally different. Okay. So what happens over here is wage rate will fall. The labor's rate will fall. Okay. And rent will increase for both the sectors. Okay. Why people are not, their demand for the land is higher? Because wheat production, right? I need more land, so maybe I'm charging higher, or she's charging higher, right? The demand will be higher. Okay. So that is what happens in the US for the long run. Okay. So you have to see first, what is the initial price? When I have a trading, what happens? So what happens to the price level after I initiate the tradings? Then what happens to the productions? Let's see. Okay. So to understand this, you have to understand the basic law of demand and law of supply. Okay. So, and this one, you have to think from the perspective of a producer. Okay. Is that fine? Jana? Okay. Okay. Under this HO theory, you have three implications, right? From this theory itself, you can come out with three different theorems over here. So the first one is Stokes-Emerson theorem. Second one is specialized factor pattern. And third one is factor price equalization. Okay, but this is something, the third one is something that most of the economists couldn't agree. Okay, they say that how you want to equalize the prices between countries is impossible. right? So that is something that, people are against it till now. Lah. Okay. So under this Samuelson theorem, they say that change in the relative prices will okay. Expect that I have work, right? Usually that will be like like small, small countries like Singapore, but land is very small. Okay, so over there you can say that I'm going to have a wheat production in Singapore. You can't say that, right? Because it may not have abundant in that particular country. Okay, if like Vietnam, we can know that you have a lot of labors, right? So this particular country will be labor abundant. So you want to open your production in this country? Yes, you can, because you have a lot of labor, right? Even land also possible, right? So this is what you have to, the factor. Okay, the factor that you are referring over here is land and labor only. Okay. Then the factor price equalization, right? So this is something that, like I mentioned just now, people doesn't agree, right? They said that, for example, I'm working in Malaysia, right? I'm getting salary in ringgit Malaysia, right? I cannot expect those qualification, the same qualification as me, to get the same salary in US, right? If I'm working in US, I might be getting much more higher salary, right? But I'm working in another country. Obviously, you have to look into the cost of living of that particular country. So you cannot have price equalization over here, right? You can narrow the gap, but not you cannot have equalization. Okay, so that is what explained by here. Okay, I think one of the example I have given you in your lecture slides also. In your HLMS, right? I have uploaded your lecture slide. Over there, I have given you an example for this factor price equalization. Okay, where you can narrow the gap of income, but you cannot have equalization. Okay. This one is HO theory. How does it explain overall? Okay. So what we have over here is you can compare the HO theory in between of these three. Okay. First is the factor of endowment, the factors which is available in countries, right? Different country will have different level of factors, right? You have to consider on that as well. Okay. Second is the international trade for various products, whether you have diversification or do you have choices to choose and so on, right? And the last one is the factor proportions. How much is the proportion, the resources needed to produce this particular goods? Okay. So when we want to measure this factor of endowment, the availability of factors which is available in the country, you can look into the labor, the number of labor, the capital which is available, and the land which is available also. Okay, so you can identify it based on these three factors. Okay. Okay, so the others you can read by yourself. Okay, so this is overall under this fourth chapter, the theories. Okay, I have highlighted all the important theories over here. Any questions so far for all the three chapters that I have completed? Comparative, absolute. Then I have completed on the HO theories. Okay. Okay, now, before I move on to the next one, let's do some exercise. Okay, you can take out your paper or pen, right? You have to do some calculation over here. Okay. This is based on what we have done just now, what we have completed in the morning. Okay. The first question was, the US can produce 50 cars and 25 tools. Okay. Peru can produce 20 cars and 15 tools. Okay. What is the opportunity cost of producing car in US? I give you guys 2 minutes. Calculate it and find the answer. You can draw it in a table format, right? Country A, country B, and two products. You already know the answer, you can tell me. Yeah, this please calculate. How many of you said it's A? Anyone got the answer A? How about B? How about C? How about C? Huh? How about D? Okay. So the correct answer is B. Okay. So in case you want, you can do it in a table, right? You can do it in table, or if not, you just do your calculation. Okay. So the answer will be 0.52. Okay. Okay. Second question. Did you guys write down you guys take picture of this, Okay. Take picture of this. So you'll be using the same information for the next upcoming questions. Okay. 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 From the previous question, who has the absolute advantage in tools? Take picture again. Or you write down some the information here for the first question. Okay, then okay. So who has the absolute advantage? Yeah. How many of you say it's A? Okay. How many of you say it's B? How many of you say it's C? One. How many of you say it's D? Okay. So the answer will be B. AUS. Okay. Because to determine who has the absolute advantage, right? You just have to compare the total amount, right? So in US, we have 25. In Peru, we have 50, right? So US has highest lah. Because we didn't ask you to calculate the opportunity cost. Direct to the straight to the point. Okay. So B is the right answer. Okay. Third one. Who has the absolute advantage in the production of car? Usually students will like absolute advantage because we don't need to count. You look at the table, you can find the answer already, right? How many of you say it's A? Cannot say A, right? Because the second question you can find the answer, right? How about B? Okay. C and D? Okay, right answer. B. Okay. Because US they can produce 50 and Peru they can produce 20. So you compare the same amount of resources because we don't have the information about resources, right? So we assume it's going to be. So obviously US is higher than Peru over here. Okay. Okay. Who has the comparative advantage in car? Now you have to calculate. Yeah, I give you guys 2 minutes to calculate. You have to calculate opportunity cost. Right, because they say comparative advantage. Okay. How many of you say it's A? Okay. B? Obviously cannot be the answer. Huh? C? Cannot be the answer also. How about D? Okay, so that's the right answer. D. So to calculate this, you have to calculate the opportunity cost, right? So the lowest opportunity cost will be the right answer, right? So when you calculate for producing a car, so US has the lowest opportunity cost, which is 0.5, comparatively 0.75. Okay. So then you can straight away write your answer D lah. Okay. In case it's just a calculation, then you just can calculate lah. Okay. But in case it comes in your subjective, which I didn't ask you guys, then you have to do your explanation, right? But now you don't need to worry about explanations. Okay. Okay. How about the opportunity cost of making one car in Peru? Means how much we are leaving behind about another product, right? So this one you have to calculate also. Opportunity cost of making one car. Because opportunity cost you can calculate for all, right? Comparatively, then you will find one, right? So this one in Peru for one car. Okay, is it A? How many of you got it A? Huh? B? C? D? No answer. Okay, so the answer will be B, 0.75. Okay, so you can give the information. Okay, so one car in the Peru, that means you are required to give up the production, which is 15/20. You know, if you are focusing on car, you are leaving behind your tools, right? So that will be your answer, right? So it's 0.75 tools. Okay. Okay. Now, what should the US import? So based on the information just now, right? So which one do you think that US should import? So to answer this question, you should know that US is going to specialize in what, right? So if US is specializing in this good, the other good, they are going to import it, right? So that is what you have to find. Okay, how many of you saying A? No, B? Tools, B. Okay, C? How about D? Okay, so the answer will be B, tools. Okay, so first of all, right, you have to determine what the US should import, right? To know this, you have to compare the opportunity costs, right? So US has the competitive advantage in producing the cars, right? So as the opportunity cost of producing, on the other hand, Peru has the competitive advantage in terms of tools, right? That means Peru will be exporting, right? If Peru is exporting means US will be importing, right? So US should import the tools from Peru as it's more efficient for Peru to produce tools than US to produce it. US is going to specialize in cars and Peru is going to focus on your tools, right? So US is can understand the so now you already discussed. So a tool in US. What is the opportunity cost of producing a tool in US? This one you have to calculate lah. Or you already calculate earlier, you should know the answer. Okay. How many of you saying 0.75 joules? Huh? 0.5 cars? Oh, 1.3 cars? How about 2 cars? Yes, that's the right answer. Okay. I'm getting almost all the answers from there only. Huh? You are giving answer also lah. But the rest of the back not giving me answer. Okay. So either you guys are doing or you're not doing. Okay. In a while, the next exercise I will be walking around. Okay, to see. Okay. Now, US can produce 10 iPads and 20 phones, and China can produce 20 iPads and 30 phones. Okay. Now you have to calculate. Who should produce what? So if you cannot solve with absolute advantage, then you have to solve it with a opportunity cost. Okay. You can just put it in a table, like I always say. For example, US, then you have China, then you have X, then you have phones. Right? So US, 10, 20, 20, 30. So you can put it in a table like this, then you can calculate also. For your exams, please bring your calculator. Right? Don't forget, calculator, pencil for your MCQ, section A, right? Calculator is important, Then please bring your ruler. Maybe in case you want to draw the graphs, right? In your second questions, you must have ruler. Okay. Okay, how many of you getting A? They should not specialized. Huh? How many of you saying that US should focus on iPad and China should focus on phones? Also. How about C? US should focus on phones and China to iPads. Okay. And who are saying both should produce iPads? If both should produce iPads means it might be a absolute advantage, right? But then if you are comparing this, it should be a comparative advantage, right? So one should focus in another production. Okay. So the answer is C. Okay. So you in the US, the opportunity cost of producing one iPad is 2 phones. So you calculate this, you will be getting one phone is 0.5 iPads, right? Whereas the China, one phone is equivalent to 0.67 iPads, right? So based on the calculation, so we can see that US has the comparative advantage in producing the phones and China has the comparative advantage of producing the iPads. Okay, so C will be the right answer. Okay. Okay, last question, I guess. What is the opportunity cost of producing one iPad in US? if you have tables like this, right, you can simply calculate and put your answers here. Based on that one calculation itself, you can answer a lot of questions, right? So usually if I give questions like this, I will give one table, then I will have like 4 questions. So once you've done the calculation, right, you can just pull out the figures, right? So what might be the answer here? How many of you saying it's A? 1.5 phones. How many of you are saying 2 phones? Okay. How many of you are saying 0.33? Okay. How many of you saying is 0.5? The majority got it lah, 2 phones. Okay. Last one. Opportunity cost of producing 1 phone in China. What's the answer? Calculated already, right? That will be how many of you saying is A? 0.5. Nana? How many of you saying is B? 2 iPads. C? 1.5. And D? 0.66. Okay, that's the answer. Okay. 0.66. You take 20, you divide by 30, right? You will be getting 0.667, right? That is in 3 decimal point lah. You just use it 2 decimal point. 0.67 or 0.66. Approximately over there. Okay. Can Dana? Okay. I hope you guys are awake after your lunch. Okay. So that is why I keep this calculation now. No, at least you know your brain can be awake a bit. Okay. I know evening class a bit, after heavy lunch, right? We have the tendency to sleep. Okay. We have last 2 more chapters that is important for your midterm. Like I said, your section B, the case study that I'm going to give you will be based on trade restrictions. So it can be either tariff or non-tariff. It can be either one, right? But doesn't mean that it's just going to focus on tariff and non-tariff. I can relate it to your demand and supply as well, right? For example, if I impose tariff, what will be happen to the demand for the product? What will happen to the supply of the product? No? If I lower the tariff, right? What will be the consumer's perspective towards it? Right? If I say consumer, that means I'm asking you to think from the demand side, right? If I ask you from the producer side, then you have to talk from the supply side. So when you are explaining about all these things, right? You have to use your demand and supply knowledge into these trade restrictions. So that is the most important one. Okay. So first of all, tariffs. Okay. That doesn't mean a tariff will come out only for your section B. I can ask in your MCQs as well. For example, I can ask a simple, what is the definition of tariff? What is the definition of non-tariff? What? I can give you few examples. Then I can say which one of this doesn't include under tariff, right? For example, under non-tariff, we have a lot, right? Like quota, subsidy, VTR, right? So I can put it like a categorization of under non-tariff barrier. I can ask you which one is a tariff over here. Simple questions like that. So you must know basic theories also. Okay. So over here we have tariffs, right? So tariff is normally the taxes which are imposed on the imported goods, right? So now, imported goods and services typically levied at the border by importing countries, right? This is For example, like now US, right, is imposing tariff, right? This is what we call it as tariff. The taxes being imposed from one importing country to other countries. Okay. So the purpose is, for sure, they want to protect their domestic industries. That is their main reason, obviously, right? Second, they want to raise revenue for the government, right? Because higher tax you are paying, it goes to your government, right? And also connecting the trade imbalances. So when I said about trade imbalances, I'm talking about, remember I mentioned just now about X more than M. What does it mean? Right? Surplus, right? If M is more than your X, deficit, right? If I have X equivalent to your M, trade balance. That's it, right? So they want to correct the trade imbalances, right? So what happens now in US is their import is higher than their export. So they impose a higher tariff. So they will bring down the trade deficit, as long as even they didn't reach surplus also fine, as long as they can reach the balance, right? So that might be one of the intention. Okay. So if in the question, right, I ask you why they are imposing a tariff, right? You might not be able to find from the case study, but from your understanding from the syllabus, you should be able to answer, right? First is to protect the domestic industries. Second, to raise the revenue for the government, right? Third is to correct back the trade imbalances. You know, even you can, you can write this and show me also in your exam paper. I will give you marks for that. Okay. The more that the information that you put it in your section B, all those will be contributing marks, right? Okay. So like types of tariff, right? So we have few lah. Okay. Ad valorem tariff or specific tariffs, right? So ad valorem tariff will be in terms of percentage lah. Okay. Specific means specific goods, specific amount of tariff being imposed. Okay. Compound tariff or combination. Compound means combine, right? So combination of ad valorem and specific. Okay. Then they have a protective tariff. This one to help the domestic industries lah. Okay. But then normally when a country impose a tariff, they will say that to protect the domestic industries. Okay. Then revenue tariff. This one for the sake of government lah. They want to make sure that the government is gaining their revenue from the tariffs. Okay. So these are the types. Okay. So the effects of the tariff on the international trade. Okay. So obviously it will affect on the comparative advantage. Why it's affecting? Because you already know that, okay, this country is going to specialize on this, right? So the other country is going to import from this country. But if import tariff is being, put over there, right? They will have been affecting on the trading activities, right? So if I want to import that particular goods, for example, Malaysia want to import from Vietnam and Vietnam impose a tariff to me. Obviously, I don't want to buy anymore, right? Even though you are specialized in that, I don't want to buy, right? So there is a risk of retaliation, right? So that is what happened between US and China. You guys know what happened in US and China in terms of trade? What is that? It's a trade war, right? So when US imposed a tariff, China retaliated with a higher tariff, right? Even like 2 days ago, when US imposed, they imposed another 50% extra. There is a risk of retaliation, right? So it will be distorting the market. Okay. So this is one of the famous case study that I can give for your section B. So I already tell you guys. So you have to read more on this. Okay. So one of the famous one. Okay. So there is a negative effect in terms of reduction in the trade volume. I don't want to import anymore. Or I reduce my import activities because higher tariff. Okay. Or trade diversion. So I don't want to take from you. I will go to another country. Right. Maybe there are few countries that are supplying the same amount. Right. So I can go to the country that has a lower tariff. Right. So that is trade diversion. Have you guys learned about trade creation and trade diversion in your classes? Have you done the chapter of tariff and non-tariff? Then, that means you should have covered the trade diversion and creation. It should be in one of this chapter. Okay. So your diversion means you are going away from one country to another country. Okay. And retaliation. So retaliation is what I mentioned just now, the risk of retaliation. I impose 10%. Another country impose another 20%. Then I said, oh, you impose 20%. I will impose 30%. You know, both countries are fighting to increase the tariffs, right? So that is retaliation. It can lead to a trade conflicts and it will affect on the protectionism. Hannah, these are the important lah. Okay. These are the points that you can write in your exams. Okay. Okay. This is a case study. Can you guys open your HLMS? HLMS, and I think the first one, the first US-China trade war. This one, the first case study. Case study one. Okay. So try to read this. Okay. A short one. Maybe a few of you guys in a group means can divide and read lah. Okay. Can divide and read and then try to answer these questions. Okay. I have approximately like 2, 4, 6, 8. In between of this, you have your exam questions. I cannot say which one is which lah, right? But then similar to your exam questions, right? So what I try to tell you, the article that I have given you, right? In your exam, you will have an article like that. You have to read and you have to write the essay for 3 questions. Okay. So from here, I have 10, right? In your exam, I only have 3. So you have to write an essay based on that. Okay. So I give you guys around 10 minutes. You don't need to write answers for all. Just write point form, right? But in your exam, don't write point forms. Now we don't have time. Okay. If I ask you to write, then it will be like 1 hour, right? So try to understand the article, find the keywords, and give me the points. Okay. Then later I will discuss the answer. Okay. Can I give you 10 minutes? Now is 2:18 until 2:28. Okay. Don't open Facebook or social media. I know usually students will open Facebook, Instagram in their laptop, doing something else. The event will be like whole day. The event. No. Whole day, is it? Write down the points. The tallest building here. See, one of the building is very tall there. You know what? So this one. One is very tall. I don't know. And not one. I know.
Okay.
So the very tall one. Looks like one pointed finger is tall.
Ah,
I think
81.
81. The name itself IT1. Landmark. Yes. 81. Then- Right in. So that is the tallest building, huh? You have to know which one. That is the tallest building. So they have office inside. Normal people can do it. So they have shopping mall inside? Yes. Similar like the LCD lah. Like in Malaysia we have the LCD, right? You want, right? You have shopping malls. The Twin Tower. Yes. You guys have been to Malaysia? Okay, sir. You guys came for studies or your vacation? In Kuala Lumpur. For you have to review that. Family. Nice. How about you guys? Long time ago, yeah. So very soon you guys can come to Malaysia lah. I have been to Vietnam few times in Ho Chi Minh lah. But in 2019, I came with my cousins. I went to Nha Trang. You were born there. So like my place, right? Then like I went to the theme park there. What we call that? Peaceful lah. I went there. Yeah. So from Ho Chi Minh, Saigon, I took train. 8 hours train. Go Nha Trang, right? Train. 8 hours, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. 10 hours. Maybe not 10 hours, I can't remember. I went around 2019. That time I was still a student lah. So I don't want to fly. Expensive, right? So I took train lah, cheaper. So I took train from Ho Chi Minh City to Nha Trang. Only place that I have never been in is Hanoi. Hanoi I never been. It's another one. Quite famous also.
In center.
They start with S. Like a beach kind of place, is it?
No, the mountain.
Mountain, There's a lot of places here, right? The one with the finger bridge one. They will have like a finger and they have a bridge. Dana. Yes. Dana will have a
Cái gì đấy không phí giờ lại
Okay. I think we can discuss the answers. I was just giving the hints to answer the questions. So they ask you, when did the US-China trade war officially begin? And what were the initial triggers, right? From the imposition of the tariff, right? So they're asking you what is the main initial point that triggers the war between them, okay? So the answer will be, right? So it begins in July 2018. This is a history, right? So if you have the information, you can already write it, okay? So it starts in July 2008 when US imposed tariff, which is 34 billion worth of China goods, right? Due to this, it triggers the China to impose a higher tariff, right? So they have includes the concern about China's trade practices, such as intellectual property theft and false technology transfers, right? So this is one of the reasons why even China, right? If you go to China, you cannot use Google. All the US things you cannot use over there anymore. Google, right? Over here we can use Google, right? So over there you cannot use unless you illegally use it, lah, right? Even like Apple products, you can't really find it there. They will still sell it, but it's like illegal things, lah. Okay. So they have higher tariffs on that. Okay. Okay. Second question, they ask you what were some of the key products targeted by the tariff by both the US and China during the trade war. That means they might not have imposed the tariff in all the products, right? They might have tariffs, but in certain products, right? So they're asking what were those, okay? So you can answer lah, okay? The key products targeted by tariff from both sides include the agriculture goods such as soybeans and pork, okay? As well as the manufacturing goods like electronic and machineries. Okay, and this tariff has significantly impact on industries in both the countries. So it has led to a reduction of the sales. Supply chain has been affected. Supply chain, import and export activities has been affected, and job losses. Right. So if that particular country are not exporting anymore, you are shrinking the sector, obviously it will cause a job losses. Okay. So another important thing that you have to know when you are reading an article, you try to find out the main important informations. Okay. So this kind of informations you can actually read it from your article. Okay. So over here you already know that these are the targeted goods. Okay. Some countries when they impose a tariff, they will say that okay, we are imposing a tariff this much, but exempted by these products, right? Like example, recently, US imposed the tariff, example on Malaysian goods for 24%. Okay, it was 14%. They include 10%, right? So even for Vietnam, they would have that, add another 10%. Okay, they increased it to 24%, but they say that exempted on the products, right? semiconductors. Exempted means what? Got tariff or no tariff? Exempted means got tariff or no tariff? Means no tariff. Okay. So US said that, okay, for Malaysia, I'm imposing 24% exempted on the products like semiconductors. Why? They need semiconductors, right? For them to produce the machineries, right? They need semiconductors, right? And the highest semiconductors that US is importing is one is Taiwan, another one is Malaysia. If they impose a very high tariff, obviously these two countries don't want to give them any money, right? So they impose, they say that exempted, no tariff. So they're smart enough, right? They know that to whom they want to impose the tariff, right? So now in the case study that I'm going to give you for your exam, these are the information that you have to find it out. Are they imposing tariff for all the products or certain products? And why they are doing so? So you have to think. Okay, so that might be one of the guidelines that I can give you. Okay, good answer just now. The question is, discuss the progression of the tariff imposed by both sides and how the tariff can increase over the time and what is the implication for bilateral. What is bilateral? What is bilateral? What is unilateral? One way, right? One way. That means I'm having a trading with you, but I'm not gaining anything from you. So that is unilateral. Bilateral means I export, we import, no? Exchange of goods between two countries. This bi means two. So two countries. Okay. So the answer will be the progression of tariff. So both the US and China imposing multiple rounds of tariff on each another. That is what we call it as retaliation. Okay. And this escalation has found the implication on the bilateral trade, resulting decrease in the import and export activities between the two goods. So what am I importing and what you are exporting? Both has been affected because of higher tariff, right? So what you can conclude over here? Tariffs are disturbing the market condition, right? So that is the main consequences, right? Okay. Part one. They ask you primary objective, right? So why is the intention of US is imposing tariff on the China goods, right? So one of the main intention is to address the trade imbalances, right? They want to reach the trade balance because now US is running on trade deficit. This is the answer that you have to explain to me, okay? So US is experiencing a trade deficit. They want to reduce the trade deficit, trade imbalances, right? They want to reach the balance of the business. So what they have to do is impose a higher tariff, right? So that people will buy local products, their own production, okay? So protect domestic industries and compel the US, China to make structural reform to its trade policies. But what China did was they retaliate. They don't want to agree with that. Okay. So then they have imposed on US goods and it make measures to safeguard its own industry. Because both are big giants, right? US is one of the biggest giant of economy. China also quite big, right? So just imagine both are fighting across each another, right? So this will affect all the other trading partners as well. Okay, so this is the basic understanding. Okay, so now US is not just having a retaliation towards China. There is another country that they are retaliating also. What country is that? What country is now having a retaliation with US also? Other than China. Any guess? Huh? Malaysia? Malaysia no lah. Malaysia won't retaliate. They already say we will follow the 24%. They don't want to retaliate. Who do you feel that they are going against US? Malaysia cannot. Malaysia, they say cannot. Malaysia scared. We don't want. We don't want to retaliate. Russia. Oh, Russia and US can be friends. Why? Then I have to talk political reasons. I cannot tell politicals in class. Right. So there is a political issue lah between them. Ukraine, no. What other country? They are very close to US actually. You know what is meant by trade bloc? Trade bloc? Have you learned about trade bloc? Swan. You learned about this? So US is close with who? Have you heard about NAFTA? Right. What are the countries involved in NAFTA? Canada. Right. They have 3 countries, right? But this one old one lah. They have changed the name, right? Now they have changed the name to USMCA, right? US and it's more Mexico. CA is more Canada, right? So the other country that are retaliating with US right now is Canada. Okay, even though they are in the same trade bloc, but US is imposing higher tariff on both Mexico and Canada also. So Canada has chosen to retaliate, right? So what will be the consequences? US have just announced it, right? They are going to implement it on 9th April. So on 9th April, you can see which country is going to retaliate. For now, only China and Canada, right? So on 9th April, you guys try to open news and see what is the tariff right now, what is the condition due to the imposition of tariff rate. Can I? Okay. Okay, 5th question. They ask you, how did the US trade war impact on the global supply chain? And how is it affecting on the international trade flows? And give examples, right? Okay, this one. Obviously, it will affect on the global supply chains as companies sought to mitigate the effects of the trade by diversifying their sources, their strategies, right? Or by relocating their production facilities. So usually, like MNC's companies, right? They will look around, right? They will look around and they will feel that, okay, this country is imposing lower tariff. So they will open a company over there, right? Do you guys know MNC companies, multinational companies? Do you have here multinational companies? Example? Nestle, right? So Nestle is origin from where? Not from Vietnam, right? So they are opening their MNCs over here, right? So why they are opening over here? One will be lower tariff. Because they open the company here, they have to pay to your government, right? So they open the company over here. Okay, now they compare up. Okay, Malaysia, they are imposing this much of tariff. And Vietnam is imposing this much of tariff. Okay, Vietnam is much more lower. Why don't I open over here? I have to pay lower tax, right? So that is the first idea. Okay. Second, they will look around and look into the number of labors. So maybe in Malaysia, there are not much labors, but in Vietnam, they can find a lot of labors. The experts, the skills are there, right? So that is why the reason why they're opening over here. Okay. So they will look around. So that will be their strategy lah. The impact of tariff by diversifying their sourcing strategy or relocating production. In case Vietnam now said that I'm going to increase the tariff by 20%. So it's expensive for Nestle to pay to the government. They say that, okay, let's shut down the production over here. We will open it up in Malaysia because Malaysia is much more lower tariff. They can do that, right? So that will be the negative impact of imposing a tariff. Okay, you can give all these examples also. Okay. Okay, so that is what we have explained over here. Industries like technology, like Nestle, goes under manufacturing, agriculture, all these will be affected. So it will experience the shift in the trade flows and investment patterns. So when MNCs shut down in a country, their investment, their FDI inflow also will be lower. Right? Foreign direct investment will be affected. Right? So all these things will be affecting as well. Okay? Next. What was the question? What were the effect of tariff on consumers for both US and China? Right. So they are asking on the impact on consumers. Obviously, higher tariff become expensive, right? It will be affecting on their consumers' purchasing power. Okay. So this resulted in change in consumers' behavior, such as reduced spending on the affected goods or shift towards domestically produced alternative. So when they impose a higher tariff on the imported goods, like the main intention is to protect the local industries, right? So when the imported goods become expensive, I will end up buying my local products, right? So this is one of their intention. Since my imported goods are getting expensive, I will change my behavior of spending. So instead of buying imported goods, I will buy local goods. So this is one of the intention for US to reduce the import activities. Okay. So what is the role of tariff over here, right? So obviously tariff become the main role between China and US, right? So with both sides using threat or removal of tariff, right? So the prospect of adding tariffs will create uncertainty for businesses and investors, influencing the domestic discussion, diplomatic discussion and trade negotiation. So now no one wants to touch into US and China right now because both of them in a high retaliation. Okay. So that is for number 7. Okay, last one. This is one of the favorite question that I would say. Okay. Discuss the implications, right, of US and China trade war on global trade relation and what is on impact on the economic stability, right? Obviously, it will be a problem for the economic stability, right? It highlighted the risk and uncertainty which affects the trade disputes, right? So when they have trade disputes, then they will have a reassessment of trade policies, right? Whether the policy that they are imposing is relevant or not. It should be fair and fair practices, right? So who is monitoring all these policies? Trade policies? What chapter you guys have done over here? Until what chapter you have completed? Balance of payment. Only balance of payment lah. So trade blocks you haven't studied yet lah. Got no. Haven't yet lah. So how you know this NEPA and SNC? No lecturer told you there. Or you guys learn it from somewhere else. This class or when? No. That means good lah. You guys need more. If you guys haven't done this and you guys know about this, then it's really good. Okay. Okay, so I won't touch much on this because you guys haven't complete on your other chapters. Okay. So far, okay. On tariff. Okay. Next one is non-tariff. Okay. This is the last chapter lah, that is going to come out for your exam. Okay. Okay. So non-tariff barriers is government imposed restrictions on the international trade that does not involve tariffs. Okay, so this is considered as non-tariff barriers. Okay, so the example of non-tariff barriers over here will be on the limiting imports or exports. It can be both, right? Import as well as the export. Okay, so example like quotas, right? They will control in terms of the volume. Okay, or subsidies, right? Do you guys have subsidies over here? Subsidies. That means government will pay some of the money. You have to pay half of it. Do you guys have like petrol subsidies? Petrol subsidies. Petrol subsidy. Have you heard about the subsidy? Petrol. Do you have this? Okay. Like in Malaysia, right? For example, you pour petrol, right, for your cars, right? Our actual price is, for example, it is 250 per liter. So we have to just pay $2 per liter. So this 50 cent is a subsidy from the government. The government will pay the 50 cent. So it will be cheaper for us. So do you guys have subsidies like that? Huh? So that is one type of non-tariff barriers lah. Okay. So it can be imposed in the imported goods or exporting goods as well. Okay. Then voluntary export restraint. You are exporting certain things outside, right? So you put the restrictions over there. So this is how much you can export out. You cannot export out more. Okay, so you have restrictions and product standards. That means you have to follow certain product standard which is being imposed in your country, right? For example, right, like you said, your car, your local car over here, right? You are having the assembly over here, but you are importing certain products, right, from other countries, right? So the product standard might be, it's a Vietnam car, but you have to produce it over here. You have to assemble it over here. So that might be one of the product standard that they have. So we don't mind the products are from other places, but the assembly should be done here. Okay. And licensing requirement. That means if you want to export or import products, you must have license, right? The license can be given by the government. So the government will give you license to do the trading, whether you can import or export the particular products. Okay. So NTB means non-tariff barriers. Okay. In case you saw it in your case study, don't be shocked lah. NTBs means non-tariff barriers. Okay. So why we do have this non-tariff barriers? Because we want to protect again the domestic industries. Okay. So to protect the domestic industries from the foreign competition by imposing all these standards, quotas, right? And the government can shield the domestic productions from the adverse effect of the international competitions. They don't want that particular local productions to have any competitive from outside. No external sources that can affect them. Okay. So why? Because they want to make sure that they can create more job opportunities and they have a increasing of market shares. right? If they didn't protect, then you will face a job losses, right? Or declining market shares because this is based on the local production. Okay. Or preservations of the public health and safeties. No, like even you want to import certain food items, right? We do have standards. We cannot import certain products from different countries. Maybe because they didn't follow the guideline of the health, right? So that will be affecting over here as well. Okay. Then we have other intellectual properties or labor standards, right? For example, in Malaysia, we can only work like 45 hours per week, right? But in in your country, how long you can work? Huh? What is the number of hours you must work? Like in Malaysia, we have a policy that a human being, like normal people, we can only work maximum 45 hours in a week. Okay? If we work more than that, the company has to pay us extra, right? Or we shouldn't be actually working more than 45 hours. So do you have that kind of standards here? How long? 48? 48 hours. Okay. That's common lah, right? So before this in Malaysia also it was 48. But now they reduce it to 45. Because now we have like work from home and so on, right? So now even our government, they said that if the company is allowing to work from home, like at least 2 days in a week, they will get a exemption from the taxes and so on. So this is how they are trying to do lah. Okay. So that is also goes under this labor standards. So you must know your labor standards. If you are working more than 48 hours in a week, that means the company should pay you extra. Or you can complain to your Ministry of Human Resource. I'm pretty sure you have Ministry of Human Resource, right? So they are the one will be taking care you as a labor, right? So if something wrong in your company, they are not paying you according to your level, you can go and complain, right? And you guys have minimum wages also, right? Minimum wages, but right? But I heard that different province, you have different minimum wage, right? So you have to know lah, if you're working in this province, what is your minimum wage? If they are paying you lower than that, you can actually complain. So that is under the labor force. Okay. So why they want to do that? Because they want to make sure that you're fostering the consumer's confidence, lah, right? Okay. And this is about addressing the market failures. So this one, you can use this non-tariff barriers to address the market failures and connect the distortions. For example, the government may impose anti-dumping duties, such as dumping or subsidies, which can harm the domestic industries. So also, this can be one of the importance. Second, you can promote sustainable development. So nowadays, for example, in some of the countries, they will not use this plastics. They started to use papers. Why? They want to save the environment. Okay. So that is on the promoting on sustainable development. So certain countries, they do have regulations like that. Lah. Why they want to do that? Because they want to protect the environment to make sure that the future can be much more better. Lah. Okay. Then we have trade facilities as well, where you have electronical custom systems, single window clearance. This is when you are importing and exporting goods, right? You will have much more systematic flow. So now, can you buy goods from other countries? Can you buy goods from other countries? Do you have like online shopping platforms? Example? Shopee. Oh, so you guys also have Shopee. So you can buy from other countries. So usually what are the countries that you can buy from? China. Okay. So because the product from China can be cheaper, right? So even in Malaysia, right, there are products which is locally produced, right? We can see over there, produced from where, right? But they are from overseas also. So when we click on the overseas and see which country they are from, it's from China, right? So mostly what I have seen is from China, Indonesia, right? Those countries lah. Okay. So maybe because the products are much more cheaper, even you buy cheaper, right? So via Shopee, right? When you buy the purchasing, do you have any extra tariff that you have to pay? Taxes? No, it's just for the products lah that you are buying. So that means free flow lah. Okay, free flow of the products. Okay. Okay, so and balancing on the trade relation lah. So it can address the trade imbalances, gain market across the concession and resolve the disputes. Okay. So the types like we have is quotas, right? This is based on the restrictions on the volumes lah. Example like import quota on the agriculture products to protect the domestic farmers. Okay. For example, like what are the things that you guys are exporting to other countries? Are you exporting coffee? Yes. Are you exporting wheats? Rice? Yes. Right. These are the things that even I can find from Malaysia. Right. Sometimes when I see the product, right, it's produced by Vietnam. Right. So when you impose it to, to my country, obviously there is import tax. Okay, so that is why you are having this import, because you want to protect the domestic farmers. Okay, subsidies like I mentioned just now is the government subsidies, so that it will be cheaper for us. Like I mentioned just now, right? So it becomes cheaper for my consumers. So now I can just purchase for $2 per liter instead of 250. So government will pay another 50 cents. Okay, so that is considered as subsidy. Okay, I already give example over here. So it leads to a lower price for domestically produced goods. Okay, this is VER. Okay, so VER is voluntary export restraint. Okay, so that means it's agreement between exporting and importing countries, where the exporting countries voluntarily limits the quantity of the goods exported to the importing country. For example, Vietnam is exporting rice to Malaysia, right? You yourself will put a restriction. Only this much you can produce to Malaysia. Why? Because if you give me more, you won't have for yourself, right? So that is what we have these VER. They want to safeguard their own consumer first. Similarly, like I said, for the palm oil, if Malaysia keep on exporting the palm oil for other countries, what is left for their own country, right? So they have to safeguard also. Okay, so that is VER. Okay, I have given you an example over here as well. Okay, so comparison between tariff and non-tariff. So you can see lah. Okay, tariff is basically they want to generate revenues for the government, whereas the non-tariff barriers, they actually wanted to protect the industries. These are the basic difference. Okay. Okay. Now, you guys can open in your HLMS. There's a case study 2, right? So try to open that. That is based on the non-tariff barriers. Okay. So I have another 10 questions, 8 questions over here. I give you guys around minutes, okay, to try to identify, okay, what might be the answers. Okay. And now this is based on case study 2.
9 2
Cannot. I go back issue tomorrow. Then I hope you right. Case. So BER is one type of non-tariff barriers. Okay. So it depends. Like I can case study on quota or subsidies or BER or product standards. It can be anything, right? So, but then it all goes under the categorization of non-tariff barriers. Okay. So over here I have like 8 questions, right? The first one they're asking you what is the main arguments, right? On the BER as discussed in the article, right? So if I say as discussed in the article, you have to make sure that you got the information, right? Because I say here just in the article, so not from outside. Okay. Second, they ask you what is the motivation means the objective. Objective behind why US has requested for Japan to implement the VER, right? What? So like I mentioned, if you impose a non-tariff barriers, obviously there is pro and cons, right? So they're asking for you the effect. So it can be a positive or negative. If you can identify from the article, just take the answers from the article and explain it. Okay. Then they ask you what are the criticism or unintended consequences. Again, they say that as outlined in the article. They still ask you based on the article. Okay, so you have to look into the question. If the question said based on the article, make sure you find the answers based on the article, right? If none, then you can include your general knowledge or the theories that you have learned in your class. Okay. Then this one they ask you, according to the article again, how is it impacting on the behavior and the strategy of the automobile manufacturers? Means they are asking, just now when we look into the previous case study, I asked you what is the consequences of the consumers, right? So over here, they're asking on the producer side. Okay. And then next, they ask you what are the lessons? Right? What can we learn from that? So this one, you might not be able to read from your article. So you have to think by yourself. what is the lesson that I can learn from this case study? Okay. This one is alternative. So you can see, right, under the non-tariff barriers, you have other policies as well. So which one might be the most effective one if I'm not using the BER? It's because they ask you alternative, right? So you have to remember and you must able to explain also. Okay. Then they ask you how did the experience with the BER has been affecting on the trade policies and negotiation, right? So this is by the overall like a conclusion. Okay. So the answer for the first one, what is the main arguments, right? Okay. So the answer will be the proponents argue that the VR can protect the domestic industries from the foreign competitions, right? Particularly in cases where the foreign producers benefit from the unfair advantages. The foreigner are getting benefits, right, which they feel is unfair advantages from the government subsidies or the currency manipulation. Or you can also write arbitrage. You know, just now we look into the concept of arbitrage, right? You can include over here as well. Okay. They may also argue that we are produce a temporary solution to address the trade imbalances while allowing time for the domestic industries to become more competitive. So they are using this VER as a temporary solution. They are giving some time for the domestic industries to grow. Okay, so that is the main intention over here. Because they ask you, this is based on the article, right? They ask you the main arguments, what they're discussing about. Okay, so this might be your answer. Second one, they ask you, what are the motivation? Why is why does the US, right, requested VER on Japanese automobile? Because they have the concern about growing market share of Japanese automakers in the US market. They feel that, or they are scared that Japanese will be taking over the market in US. So they want to put a restriction over that, right? So that is what we call it as voluntary export restraint. Okay. I lost the question. Okay, so that is the intention lah behind. Okay, the third question, how did the implication affects, right, overall? Okay, so obviously while it gives a temporary relief to the US, the Americans, by limiting Japanese competition. They put a VER on the Japanese cars, so they have the intention to increase their local productions. Okay, so it lead to a higher prices for the consumers and reduce choices in the market prices. Diversity reduces, right? Because if you allow trading activities, then the people have more choices, right? So now you reduce your diversity. Obviously, you don't have choices, right? So it reduces the choices in the marketplace. For example, if Vietnam said that no more imported cars, right? No more imported car means you will have less choices, right? So that is the answer behind this lah. Okay. The fourth one is the critique, right? So they feel that we are destroyed the market dynamics, hinder the innovations, and may eventually harm the consumers by limiting the competition and innovation in the affected industries. Okay, and BR can strain dramatic relation between the trading. Okay, my answer for question 4. Okay. So number 5, this is based on the article as well. They ask you what in the behavior. So they will adjust their strategy in response to the VER. For example, increasing the production in US to bypass the export restrictions. For example, if Japan is producing in Japan and they want to export it to US, then it's different. But if they open their industry in US itself and they produce over there, right? So they can reduce the export restrictions. Why? Even though it's a Japanese car, but I'm producing in US, right? So that is why they say that to bypass the export restrictions or to focus on a higher margin vehicle segmentations. So you can think about strategy, how I can overcome this. Okay. Number 6, the lesson learned, right? So this one is based on your own idea. It can be anything, it can be subjective. There is no wrong or right answer. As long as you give me a right justification, I can accept it. Okay. So suggested answer over here is VR may provide short-term relief, like temporary solution, but often have long-term consequences because we are not solving the main issue. What is the main issue? Okay. So policymakers should carefully consider the broader implications and unintended consequences of the trade policies such as VER. So when you want to solve this problem, you have to know first what is the main problem. And number 7, what is the alternative? Like I mentioned, this one. What is the other choices that you have? Okay. So that might be including trade balances. Okay, you can have a negotiation. That means you talk between two parties, you try to negotiate. Okay, so that is on the diplomatic negotiation. Or you promote fair competition, multilateral trade agreements. What is multilateral trade agreements? What is multilateral trade agreements? More than right? Because bilateral is two, right? Multilateral like US and that is an US and the targeted domestic policies to improve the industry competitiveness. So you just give me 2 or 3 examples. Okay. So is the experience with the VR on automobile likely influence subsequent trade policies and negotiation between the US and other trading partners, right? You can highlight the complexity, the challenges of the trade policies, and you will try to address the trade imbalances and protect the domestic industries as well. Okay, so this is the answer for the last question. Okay, okay. I have a brainstorming activity, but if I do this, I won't have time to do other activity. Okay, so this one, I will upload it in your HLMS. You try to read, and then the answer is already given here also. I will upload it in your HLMS lah. Okay, then you guys try to see. Okay, but before that, can you guys open your HLMS? This one, example of section B. Okay, sorry. Oh yeah. This one, example of section B, question 2, question only, right? So this is an example of this I have done in Malaysia. Okay, because when I do a question, I will make sure that both the campus have the similar kind of questions. Okay, so this is the question that I have uploaded for them. They already done. I already marked the paper, already done all. Okay, so this is an example. Okay, so what I have given to them is China export tax rebate removal on the aluminium products. Okay, so I want you guys to read this and try to answer these 3 questions. Okay, I give you guys 15 minutes to attempt this. This is very, very important. Okay, can you guys do that? 15 minutes. Okay, 3 questions. I know it won't have enough time to write an essay, write point forms. Okay,